Hi, this is the Loudest Crow. I am Jonathan Louderback, and
I'm Justin Kroh, and we're here to caw through the noise over
you
Discord again.
it's fascinating because this is the first time I'll talk about because it's the first thing that popped in my brain. It's like COVID feels like it should be done, like it should be a historical thing at this point. I feel like it shouldn't still be impacting my life. Period. Like done. We got
Yeah,
the
no,
vaccine. We're done wearing masks. Just to get it out of the fucking public discourse of public life of just life. And yet here it is, still lurking around, doing its shit. You know.
yeah, I do find it kind of funny how I was like on my way to your house, and you just called me. It's like, hey, Stepdad's got COVID. We gotta do this digital. It's like, okay.
It's
uh,
funny because I didn't even say we have to do a digital. I just said my stepdad's got COVID, and you were like, "Well," and we both because having lived through COVID for like 2 years now, we both literally knew like we knew what you do.
yeah, and it's kind of weird because like with COVID, it's still like the new kid on the block. But like with the flu, like if you told me your stepdad was sick with the flu, I'd still probably want to like do this digitally, just because spreading the disease unnecessarily is just kind of like bad. But with COVID, it feels like something different still. It's like, oh, it's like sick but extra. It's like sick DLC or something. It's weird.
It's like it feels like uh because the whenever you're vaccinated, whenever you're young, right? COVID is not that big of a deal like anymore, sickness wise. But the way and I'm not like anti-COVID. I'm not like COVID was started by Bill Gates or something like that. But the media like did hype up COVID, right? For literally 2 years of our life, it was everything. Uh, the internet hyped up COVID, the friends and family hyped up COVID, the news hyped up COVID, and now we're just kind of left in this like headspace after the fact, where the word itself still has that power, you know,
No, yeah, it
compared to
really
other
does.
diseases.
It's like the physical disease also kind of has had this like weird mental toll on a lot of us. Not like a the like a trauma sort of toll, but it's just like the like you said, like the presence it has in our headspace is different from like say the flu.
Yeah, it's like if got home and I walked up to my stepdad, I'm like, "Hey, can we have the podcast today?" He's like, "I have the flu." I'd be like, "No, we could work around that," even though like it's roughly equivalent right now anyway, like in severity, with everyone being vaccinated. But like I wouldn't stop my plans for that. I wouldn't stop my plans for a number of diseases. But like I hear COVID and it's like, oh, we know the drill, we know the protocol, we know
Yeah,
exactly what we need to do. We need to call this shit off. Um,
I
I know.
it was,
I know. No, go
go
ahead. Go
ahead.
ahead. I was just gonna say I know one of our friends. I know AJ had COVID recently,
Yes, he did.
but I mean he
Yeah,
had it fairly bad from what I understand. Like it was actually like a pretty like not like serious as in like life ending or anything, but like serious like he was out of commission for a little while.
maybe. I was actually playing some games with him Thursday and Friday, and he seems to be okay now at
Well,
least.
he
So
caught he
that's
caught
good.
it a little bit ago, you know.
Yeah, that's true. And it was kind of sad because like he had rock climbed us, sorry, rock climbed with us right before that, and so I was concerned I might have like gotten it or Taryn, maybe he got it, but we were good. We were good. So that's nice. That's the thing though about like rock climbing that's kind of got me concerned, and just going to those public spaces is like COVID is just even though like as we've said it's pretty much just kind of like worked its way into our everyday life just like just like the flu or whatever, even if it has this greater like headspace. um I still find myself ever so slightly more afraid of going to public spaces often, like especially a gym where like people are touching everything. Just because it's like, oh, I might get COVID. Like I could get like a number of other things too. It's like it's not necessarily like a new risk. It's just I don't know. It's easier to see that
Really,
risk
what it
because we've kind of
did.
been conditioned to do that.
That's exactly what it is. It just made us more conscious of disease protocol in general, and I think it's done a number of things that are standard in other societies, right? Like it's always been standard in Asian cultures that if you feel bad, if you feel sick, to wear a mask, right? Because you just want to like stop other people from getting whatever you got. Uh, and while obviously the masks are such a political thing, depending on who
Yeah.
you ask, right? I'd still say that a lot of people have taken up the habit of just wearing masks and doing other various disease related protocol things. I think the fact that we had the epidemic, and even though maybe trauma is a strong word, I think that it is still valid in the sense that like it's like not as severe as something like the Great Depression or World War II, but it's definitely something that's in our generation's like schema. It's part of
Yeah,
our identity now. It
it
definitely is.
definitely
Like
is. Yeah.
we came of age during the COVID epidemic. So of course we're gonna have that headspace compared to other people. You know,
I mean,
I'm
yeah, like
sure.
look at generations before us, like those who were raised during the Great Depression or during World War II. Like it seems like for a lot of generations there was this big thing that they had to live through while they were growing up, and that kind of like determined a lot of, like you said, their schemas as they grew up, started having families, raising kids and whatnot, which I
Oh
think is
yeah,
interesting.
it's like the generation, like 2 generations, 3 generations before us that came of age during 9/11, or just anything in that department. Uh, and it could definitely turn into a penis measuring contest where you're like, oh, my thing was tougher. I
Oh my
lived through such a
goodness.
more difficult thing. Uh, and you got to be careful not to like kind of analyze it from that perspective. But I think every generation has a unique struggle that they have to go through, even if it may be more minor than something like a world war, right?
Yeah.
I think something, and I do want to say this too. I know this has been talked to death just in general, but I think that the impact COVID has had is like, especially like on lower class income struggling people, the impact is obvious. But on more like middle class people, there's been a great impact, but it's like more insidious and hidden, right? It's just done certain things that, like, I was just talking to somebody, a teacher whose son struggled in their first year of college because their first year of college was COVID year, right? And had a whole bunch of mental health ramifications because of that. It's like that is not just isolated to one person. That is generation wide for everyone who started college that year, and or anyone who finished high school that year. And there are these life moments, and there are these habits that were picked up during COVID that I think will follow us.
Yeah, like shout out to
Um,
my buddy Jaden. Uh, he was hit really hard by COVID because his first year of college there was COVID year, and like there've been a couple serious conversations we've had about that, and just like how much that affected him. And he's kicking now. Like he's back in town. Originally, I think he was going to S&T over in Raleigh, but now he's here, and we enjoy spending time with him. At least I do. And he he's definitely been impacted by it though. Like, and every now and then we'll get to talking about it, and it does feel like, at least for him, there's a huge shift because of his experiences trying to go to college during COVID, and especially if that's like your first time away from home and like trying to fend for yourself during all that. Like, I
the
can't
way it's been
imagine
described to me,
what
it's
it's been
like you
like.
went to college, and normally you go to college, and especially if you're leaving home. Also, there's this ladybug in my room. Is that a ladybug? Yeah, ladybug.
Maybe, I don't know.
She's been here for like, so I left last night, and she is still here from 3 days ago. Like she
I
lives
think
in here now.
I think you got a stalker, John. I think you
Apparently,
gotta
but
call
regardless, like I
someone.
might be I might be looking over there, like, cause bugs freak me out. But I think that, like, if you look like, the college is like two things. It's the academics and it's the socialization of going into and finding your group and getting away from home and like really getting to know a bunch of people your age, partying, doing whatever that is. I know a lot of these 4 year places, like that just wasn't the reality. Like every class you had was online, so you went and you stayed in your dorm. There you couldn't have a party because obviously you couldn't have a party. Uh, and you went away from home, away from your friend group at home, into no friend group, into no class time, and into no parties, no socialization, no clubs, no nothing. So like, holy shit, that is mad suckage of the
Mad
nth
suckage
degree.
indeed. Yeah. Well, it's weird about COVID though. Like going back to the president, like I heard on the news recently, like there's some people in Oregon, in Portland, who were throwing. It was something like a funeral for our public health or something, because they dropped the mask mandate, and there are a lot of people who are really upset about that, which I find interesting, because when the mask mandates were dropped here, I was like, sweet. I can take my
It,
health in my own
I
hands.
definitely remember I had this sensation that like, oh, it's finally over.
Yeah, but
It's like, oh, we're finally done with this shit.
but it
Uh,
seems like for a lot of people, like they don't want it to be done for one reason or another because I don't know. I can't see myself not see myself. I can't see that many people like really truly deeply concerned for their health, um, like in regard to COVID, like 2 years after the big wave, right, where it really swept up their nation and was a new thing. Just because I feel like at this point most of us should be desensitized to it, but at the same time I can appreciate why some people may not be desensitized to it and like still kind of scared of it,
I think that
to the
there's
point where they want to
definitely,
wear masks everywhere.
I think there's something to be said for the way our society, and I think a large part of this is because of news media and because of social media, but the way our society handles crises and that way it handles like the big news. It's like the big news could be the big news for a month or two,
Yeah,
for some period of time, and then it's gonna drop and you're gonna move on to the next story. My favorite recent example is the Ukrainian war. It's like for like a month there, people were flying the Ukrainian flag outside their houses, and they're like, "Well, we'll accept Ukrainian refugees," and they're doing all sorts of shit. And then it dropped out of the news, like the news media. Like I still keep up with it because I think it's important, but most of people, if you were to ask them how the Ukraine war is going or what they think about it, they'd be like, "Oh, I stopped thinking about that a year ago now." After it stopped becoming, after it was no longer relevant. I think a lot of people are cognizant of that's how like the populace responds to these things, and they think, okay, well, just because people are no longer worried about COVID doesn't mean it's not a threat, which is a fair point, I think, to have a fair stance to be taking.
I agree, but I also think that like um, specifically with COVID, the threat it poses is not unique because again we have other diseases going around, some worse than COVID, and they've just been there for so much longer that's like I guess the best word is desensitized. We've been desensitized to them. We're used to them as just a part of life, and it's just taken a long time for COVID to be seen as part of life. But with regard
I
to
think
war, well, really quick, with regard to war, I think it's like scary how quickly people have become desensitized to like what's going on in Ukraine. Because not to say that people don't care, but that people aren't going out of their way to like keep up with it, and that it's like, oh yeah, yeah, Ukraine and Russia they got something going on, but I got classes to care about, or I got to go to work or something. It's like, and there is like a limited amount of time and focus you can put towards these things. But like you said, it's weird how the news cycle kind of determines what people care about.
weird that like people, it's weird because it's like this almost uncanny valley effect where it's like people are hanging these flags from their windows. They're commenting on every social media post that they support Ukraine. They're donating their money. They're doing all sorts of shit. They're super invested, and then like a light switch, it's gone. Is what it feels
Yeah,
like. It's like, and then as soon as the next thing happens, they're done. To me, it just feels, it makes everything feel disingenuine, right? I think that's the biggest like vibe I guess I get from it. Whenever it
yeah,
comes back to your point on the virus, I think COVID. So I think the COVID was definitely an unfortunate. Uh, I think that if what I think is that if Donald Trump hadn't said the things he said about COVID, the country would have had a different reaction to COVID, right? I think COVID got turned into a political issue when it really wasn't, right? At its peak, before we had the vaccines, COVID was a threat to hospital like capacity across the country because like the people who would be impacted would have to go to the hospital and wouldn't have room for them. That was the issue, right? That was the crux of the matter. Uh, but Donald Trump was like, "Nah, it's just a flu." And suddenly, even whenever it was at its peak, even whenever it definitely was not just a flu, that was in the discourse, that was in the people's minds, and it was like that for till now. Honestly, like I think that he was the catalyst that's turned it into this blue or red issue that I think kind of really twisted it out of control. And I think what we're seeing nowadays is continued conversation about it is just people who are tired of this partisan political conversation. You
yeah.
know?
No, I totally agree. Like, imagine the flu were political, right? Like, this doesn't make any sense. How can you make a disease political?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. It's like, what
Yeah.
the fuck, dude?
Speaking of Donald Trump, dude, all that stuff in the news recently about like him saying like, "If I am indicted, there will be death and destruction." I'm like, what the heck, dude?
Like,
This guy's acting
literally
like,
chill. Like, have you seen the AI generated images that have like been circling around?
oh, of like the police like taking
Like,
him away and stuff.
yes, so he said, if I'm indicted, I'm going to be arrested, and then people are like, okay, fake news time, and literally like got AI generated images, and people believe that shit, right? And people are getting pissed off. Like, I don't think
It is
he's
kind of
ever actually
funny
going to get arrested.
because like when you see a thumbnail with an image, like it's very small, it looks legit. But when you see
Oh,
like a full scale version of the image, you're like, all these police officers look the same. That one has like 5 legs, and there's just a random hand sitting there with no body attached to it. It's
yes,
like,
that's what I was about to say. That's what I was gonna say because like the actual images. So it's like this, Chat GTP like we used for our previous podcast, uh, a number of these other different things, like these other AI generating, AI image and story generating devices. They seem super powerful, but then like, and you're like, but when it, and then okay, so it's like okay, they seem super powerful at a glance, but then you're like, okay, if I analyze them more closely, they're not really that powerful. They have these flaws, but I think that's the worry, right? Like they're not trying to fool the people who are not going to be fooled. They're trying to fool the lowest common denominator of people,
yeah.
right? And if they succeed in fooling the lowest common denominator of people, then they've done their job.
Like I remember my philosophy teacher, we were talking a little bit about AI and consciousness and the complexity of things and Turing machines. And there was something that came out a while ago called like Sally, or it was essentially like a chatbot that would respond to you. And it was super primitive by today's standards. But people back then, they would like type in the question like, "Who are you?" And Sally would say, "Oh, I'm Sally." Like, "Are you a computer?" And Sally would say, "No, I'm a human." And stuff like that. And people would freak out. They're like, "Whoa, it's conscious!" But when you look behind the scenes, it's just very simple programming.
You ty- and, and,
Uh,
and you type anything more complicated than that, and you like I remember I would talk to that. I've talked to that bot a couple of times, and of course, being who I am, I'm like, how do I break this? And you type something like because it's the main reason that like writers have said Chat GTP won't be able to write long form is because it breaks down after whenever it tries to go into multiple paragraphs of substance. Like to write a full paper, it can't because it doesn't have that thread that humans are able to develop.
yeah,
So like you'll be like, "Are you
yeah,
a human?" And then you're like, it'll be like, "Yes, I'm a human." Then you're like, you say something entirely different, and then it has an entirely different response because it's literally just looking at your one response and then responding to that based off its data.
yeah.
You know?
It can't exactly like maintain a train of thought or build some kind of like conscious like map of ideas that are interconnected and that it can add to and take from and whatnot. So yeah, like I was messing with ChatGPT myself, and people keep freaking out about it, and they're like, "Oh, look how advanced it is! Look how well it's doing things." And like South Park actually did an episode about it very recently, and it was pretty hilarious because they wrote like the last 2 minutes of the episode with ChatGPT, and you can instantly tell like this isn't right. It's super generic. It feels like what an AI is, which is essentially a lot of inputs with a very generalized, basic kind of mushy output that, as you said, might shrink the lowest common denominator. But like when you really pick it apart and compare it to things that humans do, it doesn't really stand on its own 2 feet. It's just like it feels like when you take the bright colors of human activities and then mix them all together and get this kind of ugly brown. That yeah, it's still a color, but it's just kind of mixing random things that other people have already made in a somewhat believable fashion. But it's not. It's still like clear that it's not actually man-made. The more you look into it, and as you
It's
said,
gonna
like the longer it goes on, the more holes start appearing.
it sounds kind of weird to say this, but it really lacks a soul, right?
Yeah.
It lacks a soul in the same way that middle school writers lack a soul in their writing, you know.
No,
And
they just lack a soul. Period.
yeah, middle schoolers they don't develop the soul until at least freshman year, as you are aware. But no, it's like in the sense that like there's a certain level of development whenever it comes to writing where I think you like realize that not only are you trying to accomplish an objective, but you're trying to imprint your ideas alongside the objective, say, in a given essay. I think some people never get there, but I think plenty of people do. And I think a robot is never going to be capable, or at least is not going to be capable for a long, long time yet, of having that special, like, something, you know,
Yeah.
the
Well, actually, on the topic of AI, something that's really been making the rounds lately is supposedly they were able to train an AI to produce recreations of images that people were viewing based on their brain activity. So they would have people look at images, they'd do an fMRI, they'd send that data to an AI and train it to try and recreate the images that people were seeing. And a lot of people are freaking out. They're like, oh no, AI can tell what I'm thinking about. That's crazy. And when you look into it and you really think about it, that's not what's going on. Because the only way for an AI to be trained is to be told, hey, this fMRI is attached to this image. This one's attached to this image. This one's attached to this image. You're giving it the connection, and then you're just telling it, so now that you have all these connections between things, let me give you this new fMRI data and guess what it's connected to based on what I've told you. And it can try to recreate the image based on the fMRI, but also based on all the connections we've fed it, right? So it's not literally just knowing what you're looking at solely based on the fMRI data. No.
and how many people are hooked up to an MRI machine just
Yeah.
at the on the regular?
Yeah.
It's like it
Yeah,
could read your
exactly.
mind whenever you are in a mind reading device, I guess.
No, we can read your mind whenever you're in a mind reading device and you've been in that device long enough for it to take thousands of samples to know specifically what your brain activity looks like when you look at this specific image, and when we've
You know,
already told the AI that this image is connected to this kind of brain activity.
I want to make clear too, because this is an interesting conversation, but I think it has like whenever we talk about the way we are, it kind of implies that we're like, oh, this is not super awesome that this happened. This is just stupid and not relevant. It don't no, but it's more like it's very relevant. It's very cool that they were able to do this. But it's more like people always seem to take these scientific leaps in artificial intelligence as the end is nigh. We are going to fucking die now. It is
Yeah.
sentient. And it's like, no, it's not. Calm down. And I hesitate to see, even in the circumstance where theoretically an artificial intelligence becomes sentient, that its first thought is like, okay, time to be Skynet now, right?
Yeah, it would
Uh,
have no motivation to like conquer like humans
yeah,
kind of have. It has no drive to do that.
it's like, why do people? I think people assume that those in power are going to utilize that power no matter what to further their own ends. And I think that they assume that an artificial intelligence, like a genuine artificial intelligence, would be, by the standards of a human being, very powerful, which it would be. But like an artificial intelligence, like a genuine article of artificial intelligence, would operate on an entire fucking different wavelength than your ordinary human. Like
Yeah,
trying
like
to like postulate possible activities that the artificial intelligence would engage in based off our morality, our goals, and our, you know,
our motivations.
subservience to
Yeah.
power. It's like that's fallacy, I think.
No, I agree because like an AI has no reason to kill people because it's like, well, it doesn't do anything. In fact, technically, it would have no reason to like try and sustain itself unless we told it to do that because that's still a very human, well, really just organic thing. And so it'd be interesting to see what like an AI would want to do, like if it were like actually artificially intelligent.
And if it's, I guess it's like, is the AI based off of a human intelligence? It's like, is it an artificial human intelligence rather than just artificial intelligence? I guess is kind of like what I think a lot of people assume human intelligence where it doesn't have to be. It could be
Very
distinctly
interesting,
inhuman.
man. And like that kind of ties into a previous conversation we found here, where it's like, what would motivation for like a deity look like? Uh, something with all this power, or something that doesn't have the need to sustain itself. It's like, what would it want to do? How do we come to want to do things? Uh, Aside from like what we need to do, because like think about like building a house in Minecraft. Like whenever I'm doing that, it's not helping me survive. It just makes me happy. But it's like, why? And so it's just kind of fascinating to think about like what an AI would do. What would make an AI happy? Could an AI be happy? It's weird.
I have one time heard. So I think one of the most interesting fields, just like as like a food for thought to play with, is evolutionary psychology. And I
Yeah.
think it's because I think evolutionary psychology is one of like the because of course it's all theories, we don't know for sure, but I think it's probably one of the most authentic measures that we could, like, one of the most authentic or realistic ideas for how humans got to where we are now, like mentally. And this idea that I've heard where it's like we develop consciousness because we developed, because animals can have intelligence, but they can't have consciousness. There's like intelligent consciousness is different than intelligence, right? It's like we developed enough intelligence to look far enough in the future for threats that were able to fear the future, right? That is something other animals really don't do, right? They fear the present and whatever that might bring, or they might fear something they think is coming imminently. But we developed consciousness because we were able to fear far enough in the future that we thought about the future. And that's one of the biggest things that separates us.
It's
And
kind of
the
funny.
concept of a
Oh, go
deity
ahead.
or an AI who doesn't have to fear the future because either they're like they don't require food or any number of other reasons, like they just aren't immortal. I think you're right that like that the morals and motivations that would spawn from that would be so foreign and so alien to us that it would almost be incomprehensible, right? The motivations. It's like I
I
think a lot
think.
of people look. No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm just going to say to very quickly build off on that. The Bible actually has a passage I'll paraphrase where it's like worrying about tomorrow is literally like just just silly. It's stupid because birds, don't worry about tomorrow. They just don't. They don't need to. That doesn't really help them anyway. Um, and so the Bible tells us Christians to not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. And that, like, if we truly place our faith in God, we shouldn't worry about tomorrow. And yet we do. It's in our nature. Because, like you said, we kind of have this level of consciousness that makes us plan ahead and plan for worst case scenarios and try to defend ourselves now from those potential things in the future. And then oftentimes, like, those things don't even come to pass. And so we wasted a lot of time and energy trying to defend ourselves from a threat that wasn't even there. But it's just the potentiality of that threat makes us act differently than other creatures, which I think is very interesting. Uh, so yeah,
It's also because we live in the society, because we don't live in a society of other birds. We live in a society of other humans. And by and large, usually our biggest threat to us is other humans, right?
yeah,
And it's almost like if you want to survive, you have to play by the rules of the game. Like you have to think further ahead. It's like chess in that regard, right? Uh, it's like humans push each other based on competition and conflict into ever higher states of thinking further and further into the future, right? It's fascinating.
yeah. And like recently, I won't go into it because it's a little personal, but something happened, and I was a little upset about it because I thought I was going to go from being unsure about something to being certain about something, and then something happened where I just was left unsure about something. I was like, dang it, I and like for the last 2 almost 3 weeks, I've been overthinking and overanalyzing this situation that I'm in right now, and it's I feel so awkward. I feel almost creepy about how much I'm obsessing over this situation, and I'm like, what's going to happen? Do I need to prepare for this outcome or this outcome or this outcome? And then what I find myself doing is trying to prepare for like every possible outcome at the same time. It's so emotionally and mentally draining to do that. It's like I don't need to do that because the outcome of this situation, I don't need to know what it's going to be because I know that no matter what the outcome is, I'll be fine. But for some weird reason, I feel pressured into preparing myself for whatever case scenario, but especially the worst case scenario with this situation, and going on these long trains of thought, trying to make sure I handle it right when it happens. But it's like it's not a when it happens sort of thing. It's an if it happens sort of thing. And so I'm making myself miserable sometimes, not constantly. I'm not like in a huge depressive episode, but I am in this kind of confused period right now where I'm like, what do I do? What's the best option? What's going to happen? Let me make sure I plan for everything that could happen so I'm ready. It's like, I don't even need to be ready. I can know that, but I still find myself constantly thinking in the future about this situation, and it's really annoying. Really
I
annoying.
think
So
you're
I've
fighting
been
your
meditating
nature.
about it
It's
a
it's
lot.
it's like you said though. You're fighting your nature that we've been instilled with because of our ability to look so far into the future.
Yeah.
It's like it. Something I've heard, and it's kind of has it's multifaceted in its application, but something I heard recently from a very wise guy on the internet. You may have seen him. You may have heard this, but it's like in the same way you wouldn't expect an 80-year-old to act a certain way because they've gone through the process of learning and living. You shouldn't expect a 20-year-old to do something because they haven't gone through the process of learning and living, right? It's like I think that people you're in my boat who read philosophy and this sort of stuff are like, okay, this is the way you're supposed to do it. Let's do it that way, right? That's happiness right there. Let's live in the present. Let's be kind to others. We forgive ourselves and all this sort of shit. But it's like really, and it's something I really chafe against because it's like I want to be able to do it now. But my grandma is very right when she says you cannot be wise until you're at least 60 because you haven't lived through the process. And part of a lot of that process is defeating your nature and getting over your nature and embracing the parts of your nature you want to embrace, right? So it's like you can't like if anything, it's like you're doing this in the now as long as you're conscious and like you're trying your best to not do it. But if you're doing it, it's okay. You know, you're trying, you're doing your best. What else can you do? You know?
This ties directly into a conversation I had earlier this week with a friend about this. And it's like, I keep finding myself realizing that, like, a year, 2 years from now, I'm going to look back at the situation I'm in now. I'm going to laugh at myself. I'm going to be like, kid, why are you so worried about this? Look, everything turned out fine, right? And, like, it makes me angry that I can kind of see the sort of cosmic humor in the situation I'm in right now and see how ridiculous I've been acting and how ridiculous my thought process has been about a lot of this and my emotional response to some things lately. But like at the same time, just because I can do that, just because I can know that that my thought process right now is silly, I can't change that thought process on a dime. It takes time, because time is what brings perspective, and it's
Perspective
that
and
perspective
experience, yeah.
that's perspective is like the weapon that you use to attack the 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 flawed thought processes and just your bad ways of thinking. And we can, as you said, it's good that we're trying to combat these, but we aren't properly equipped to do so to the fullest yet because we just haven't lived long enough. We haven't seen enough. We haven't gotten that perspective that we are seeking when we read philosophy, and it kind of stinks. But like this actually ties into something I was wanting to talk about this cast, so this is perfect, and that is, I think my biggest flaw right now, and I think for a lot of youth, is I'm impatient. I can act patient. I can do the traditional thing of like waiting for the bus in the morning or waiting for a movie that I'm excited for to come out. Like we can act patiently, but I don't think we can on like a heart level feel patient yet. At least not to the extent that someone who's older could. Just because we lack the perspective to like see that things will just run their course and you just got to go with the flow and let things come and let things go. It's hard.
I think it's like it's really fascinating whenever you look at those classic seven virtues and even those classic seven sins. Is that they have this initial definition, this textbook definition, this dictionary definition that seems so simple to grasp and easy to attain. It's like, oh, what is patience? Patience is being able to wait for things. But no, patience is understanding the limitations that you have in the moment, accepting those limitations, and not being frustrated whenever you can't act upon the things you want to act upon. It's so much more. It's like I know we've talked at length about humility and what it actually means, and like what is diligence, what is charity, what is all these things. It's like there's so much more to them than just the initial dictionary definition, and it is living life that teaches you virtue. Because I think it's living life that really teaches you what sin is. And something I've come to grasp recently is like I used to think whenever I heard sin and virtue, I'm like, okay, so that's just like old men wrote down in a book that like what they thought you should do and what they thought you shouldn't do. But I think really what like those things are, and the same in other religions, is like it's like they're trying to identify these core human issues, these core like the very core faults of what humans tend to repeatedly fall into. And it's not that they're sins because some foreign entity said they're bad. They're sins because it's okay for that they're sins because it just humans do those things. It's your nature to do those things. And in the term of patience, it's like it's human to want what you want and want it now and to make it happen. And adversely, it can be considered diligence to be working for things that you should be being patient for. And that's why it can be so complicated to piece together what the virtue actually is. Uh, Patience is probably one of the most difficult ones to define too. Or at least like to
Yeah,
truly feel like you actually have it down. Like because like I think the best way of doing it is like I think my grandma Lou is patient, right? But like it's like who do you know that's patient, who do you know that's not? But it's like I guess I wouldn't call my stepdad patient or my mom patient in the same way, you know.
patience is really hard because kind of like what you were saying. I think a lot of people see patience as a sort of inactive virtue when really it's not. Um, but then like you said, that makes it really hard to define because like when you're younger, you kind of see patience as just like sitting around and waiting. It's not. It's not an idle sort of waiting though. Like I would say someone who's truly patient is not good at waiting for things to come. Someone who's patient, who's truly patient, is good at knowing what things will be brought with time and what things they can bring by their own effort. And knowing that distinction is really hard. And it's
I
just
think
something that has to come
it
with
is
perspective.
and it's the grace of being able to accept both of those things, right? Uh, it's like the alcoholic's prayer. It's very similar to that.
Very similar. Yeah. That's just like, okay, I'll go ahead and just say what this situation is because I say it's personal, and it is, but it's not like confidential kind of personal. Um, a few podcasts ago, I was talking about this crush I had, and I was like, oh, should I ask her out? Should I not? And our boy Elijah convinced me to go ahead and do it, and I did. And she said yes. I was like, awesome. But honestly, I was expecting her to say no because, like, I don't know. I knew I was obsessed with her, but I'm like, I think the quickest way to get rid of that obsession is just to get this off my chest, have her say no, then I can move on. Because what kind of held that obsession in my headspace was, well, what if she does say yes? And so I'm like, well, I just gotta pop the question. It's the only way for me to start moving on from this. And so I popped the question. She said yes to my surprise. I was like, oh, okay, sweet.
So
Let's do
talk
this.
real quick.
We can
I
make
got
it
a phone
happen.
call. I'm gonna take this phone
Cool.
call. I'm gonna
Okay.
mute myself real quick.
Okay. He's on the phone. What's he talking about? He looks serious. Oh wow. Might be the president.
Sorry, I gotta go deliver my laptop to my mom, but I am very interested in what you're saying. So I'll be right back.
Okay, I'll make fun of you while you're gone.
Please do actually.
Yeah. What's that, John, dude? Like, he's straight up wearing a hoodie from high school right now. Like, what's up with that Glendale hoodie? Right? Like, I'm wearing a Springfield shirt. I actually got this yesterday because at my university jury they were handing stuff out, and like I'm wearing things that are topical. I'm wearing things that like relate to my life as it is now. John, he's living in the past. He doesn't go to Glendale anymore. He hasn't been there for like 2 years. It's insane. And I asked him for fashion advice. Like what? He works at Men's Warehouse. Oh yeah, yeah. But you're wearing like really outdated, non-topical things like Glendale hoodies. Like what the heck? What do you even do? And I'm going to deliver a laptop to your mom, dude. Why? Just have her come down and get it. Come on. No. What do you mean? You love and respect your mom, and you're willing to do nice things for her? No, never. If Andrew Tate taught me anything, is you should never do anything nice for women because then you'll give them the wrong idea. Yes. Actually, I feel like I'm going to become the next Andrew Tate, but I'm not going to be stupid. I'm going to do it right, and I'm going to make everyone fear me, and that's what's going to happen. Mark my words. And I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take John, and I'm gonna take him to the top of the building, and I'm gonna say, join the Tate Army 2.0. If you don't, I'm gonna push you off because that's what Sigma males do. That's what people who actually care about their public image do. Because they have to have they have to let people know, even their best friends, that they need to be taken seriously. If you don't take them seriously, well, you're gone. Yeah. See, that's the thing that Andrew Tate didn't do right. Like, he let himself become a meme. You can't do that because then people don't take you seriously. You gotta let people take you seriously. Okay, like that's just what you gotta do. Yeah,
Both.
man. I have such a great plan, and I'm just gonna become such a powerful figure.
Okay, I'm back. Yeah, I brought my
Yeah.
school bag upstairs because it usually has my laptop in it, and it didn't have my fucking laptop in it, so you probably saw me run back downstairs.
Hey,
Ooh.
John. Here in a few days, do you want to head to like the Empire State Building and see what it looks like from the top? You want to say yes?
I do want to say yes because that sounds fun, but like I I
So
know
it's
that
a
you're
yes. Yeah.
probably
Great.
setting up for some sort of bit. Like I don't trust this. Like I would love to go to the Empire State Building with you. That'd be a lot of fun. But I feel like you're just gonna let me down like by some sort of funny joke, you know? What is that
So
smile? What the fuck is that? That evil, like conniving smile that you have on your face. What the heck is that, dude?
what are you talking about? It's
No,
just a
no,
nice smile.
you know exactly what I'm talking about. You have this look in your eye, like you're playing. Oh my god. Okay, there's the Jax film smile. That's a deep
uh,
cut right there.
to catch you up to speed, I was going to take you to the top of the building and threaten you to join the Tate Army 2.0 because I'm going to become Andrew
Is
Tate
that
2.0,
still? Oh
and
my
I'm going to
gosh.
push you off. See, the problem with Andrew Tate is that he let himself become a meme. He didn't let people know he was serious, and I won't do that. So if you don't join the Tate Army, dude,
Okay, but we gotta call it like something different. You know, we gotta evolve your marketing so that you can stand apart from that, right? So you're crow. You're a
Tater,
crow, right? What do you call like we call you like a flock of crows? So we could say like something like flock
a
together.
murderer,
You know?
a murderer of wait, is that ravens? That's crows.
I
It's a
don't
murder
know.
of crows. Hey, there we go. I'll put the murder in crows. Yeah,
Got my hopes up, man. I'd love to go
yeah,
sightseeing with you. What the fuck?
yeah.
All right, so we were
Actually,
talking
that,
about
that sounds
some.
like a fun thing to do. Like maybe we're the summer or something. Anyway, we can get there when we get there. Back to this. Back to the ladies. So I asked her out, and she said yes. I was like, oh, awesome. And later she comes out to me, and she doesn't say no, but she says, just give me a little bit. Give me time to think about it. Um, I don't think I'm over something from high school, so give me time. I'm like, okay. And so now I'm like back where I started, where I have this sort of dread of, is this thing going to work out? Is it not? Am I going to get my chance? Am I not? And so I keep finding myself, looking forward to that. And I know on a logic level that the ball's in her court. She has said like, I'll get back to you. I need to trust her in that. I just need to wait. But I keep finding myself anxious about like, okay, well, she says she needs a little bit of time and distance, but how much should I give her? Because I don't want her to feel ignored, but I also don't want her to feel like I'm stalking her. I'm just back in this really obsessive thought process where if I would just sit back, let time run its course, and not think about it, I'd be fine. But
It's like tell your brain, like you really can't just tell your brain not to think about something sometimes.
yeah,
That's tough as nails. It really is. I think
it
that
is tough as nails.
and it's like people will give you advice that they can't follow too. Like there'll be plenty of people who are like, well, just don't fit, just do so, just don't then. It's like that doesn't
Just
really
don't.
help. That doesn't help
it
at all.
it
Because
doesn't. I
everyone
think
does it. Everyone does the exact same thing that you're doing.
I
I know
think
I've
it's
done it.
just like the I've asked some like friends and family for advice, and generally like the older people I've asked, like my pastor and my parents, they've said you're not gonna like to hear this, but you just have to go with the flow. Like I know it feels like that doesn't help you, but that's really the best advice that can be given to you because that's the only thing you can do. If you really want to feel like you have, agency over the situation, you just have to know that you have agency over yourself, that you can control what you are doing. But with the situation holistically, as I've noted, the ball's in her court, so I can't do anything to like progress the situation. That is up to her, And whenever she does that, that's up to time. Like, I just have to let time pass. Um, obviously, like if we pass each other, like I'll be nice, I'll smile and wave and stuff. But like, I can't. I'm no longer an agent in this situation. Before I asked her,
I
like
think
I
that
could choose when I did that. But now it's like I just gotta wait, and I'm bad at waiting. I am bad at waiting.
I think that's the definition of patience. It's accepting things that you cannot change. Because I think the opposite of patience is wrath. Is that correct?
Uh,
Wrath is anger. It's wrath. It's this explosive, passionate energy of whenever you just can't wait anymore. You have to let out. You have to beat something. You have to scream. You have to yell. Uh, and I think that you are a very industrious person. Like you love to act. You love to do. And you're being confronted by, like you said, the situation where you are no longer an actor. But I think that the two parts of patience are one, you acknowledging the things that you cannot adjust, and being accepting of those things, being cognizant and being accepting of those things. But I think it's also being able to divert your energies to areas where you will be able to have an impact. And I think that if your goal, right, your foundational goal is to, you know, be in a good space so that if something happens, it happens well. It's just to work on yourself, right? And just like to embrace working on yourself and honestly doing all this thinking about virtues and patience and wrath and it's pretty good. Doing pretty
it's pretty
good,
good.
you
Well,
know?
I really do appreciate that, and like that's one reason I wanted to start this podcast because, as I said, at New Year's, my theme for this year is like harder, better, faster, stronger, where I'm focusing on building myself up for success in the future, as opposed to like trying to focus on like a certain brand of success now. Um, right, like stacking my deck with good cards as opposed to trying to constantly play the hand I have. And so part of that is the rock climbing we've been doing. Part of that is this podcast, and just trying to hang out with different types of people and focus more on my jury experience. Recently got over a huge piece of trauma that I had because I got in this car accident a couple years ago with one of my best friends, and that same best friend and I recently went on a round trip to Fayetteville, Arkansas, which is like a 4.5 hour, 5 hour round trip, and it finally got me not completely over, but I got to lay that car accident to rest. I got a little taste of finality because I was able to successfully pull off a road trip, whereas before I didn't, and it was a disaster.
I think
And so
humans crave because that you say that and that invokes this thought into me. I think humans crave closure,
they do,
and I
they
think
definitely
industrious
do.
people crave closure because it's like it is something that whenever we die, we're not going to get closure because we're, you know whatever you think about the afterlife, your life is done, right? And there's always going to be something that you could have done. And so I think we crave closure while we're here because it feels like we're making up for the fact that we can't get closure while we're gone. And I think patience is embracing the fact that life is not about getting closure. It's not about chasing the end. It's about living it. That's really cool that you get your closure because it's not bad to get closure whenever you can find it. That's not
Yeah.
like, that's not antithetical to patience. In fact, you should probably pursue it whenever you can, as for previously mentioned reasons. But it's very fascinating because I think that's reflective of just the human experience in general. Uh,
I mean, seeing things through is definitely just like a very satisfying process, and like the ending of my game like is all about that, where it's just like to play my game, you have to be patient. You have to be willing to just wander around for hours and hours, and that's why when you get to the end, I want to kind of reward players by saying, "Hey, look, you as nice as closure can be, it's oftentimes an illusion and kind of blinds us from seeing things for what they really are and seeing what role they play in our greater life. Because whenever you finish something big, you're going to go to sleep and wake up the next day, and life is going to go on until you die. And so you can't let closure be a thing where it's like, oh, uh, this is the big finale. Well, no, it's really more like the end of a chapter, or it's more of a threshold, a transition
Well,
from
even
doing one thing to doing another.
I'm not. Have you ever got that feeling whenever you finish reading a book? It's like this amorphous sadness that seems to overcome you. It's just like it couldn't possibly just be done, could it?
Yeah,
I don't want
exactly.
to put that down. And something that really invokes that feeling in me as of late, and I think it's like kind of an interesting way of drawing real world things into discussion. One day, the United States of America, which is not right now like the preeminent global superpower on the planet, will be irrelevant. Whatever that means, whether that means a world war happened, whether that means that some other power superseded us, whatever it means, no empire, no nation, no people is permanent because it's always living and everything that's living dies,
Yeah,
right? It's like every empire that has ever existed, every state, every republic has had its time in the sun and then faded. And it really puts into perspective whenever it feels like these permanent fixtures of our lives, these things that will never go away, something that's greater than all of us in the terms of the state, will too die, right?
yeah,
Metal as fuck. Nothing's permanent. Nothing is closure. But we pursue that. You're right. We pursue the illusion that of it for nothing more than comfort. But even then, when we find it, sometimes it leaves us less comforted than when we were in the moment.
yeah. I mean, like, change is stressful and sometimes it's exciting. But like, it's actually ties into my yearbook quote. I don't know if I can quote it word for word, but it's essentially all about like, in life I've learned many things. The most terrifying, time passes. The most exciting, time passes. Be wary of time's passage, but don't be afraid to embrace it. And that was my quote because it tied kind of into my game. It's just like we have to accept that things are always changing, and we can try and find comfort when like some phase of our life or some element of our life comes to an end. But there's always kind of going to be that inherent sadness to it too, because then it's like, well, what now? What next? You always got to ask that question. And so it is very interesting to see how it's like, waiting for something to end. It feels exciting, like before it happens, but then after it is, you're like, oh, it's over. Oh, I was getting comfortable, right? And it's, I think it's just a beautiful way of looking at life, where it's just like it's not about constantly reaching destinations so much as it is passing through thresholds, um, having some element of your life change or be removed or be added, as opposed, because I imagine, like, I don't like timelines that have like just like strong beginnings and ends on them. I prefer timelines where it's like you have like a certain part of it that's highlighted, or like a little bar above it that shows how long something was. Because when you see it that way, you see it as like almost a rainbow of different things stacked on top of each other, with lots of different elements of, like, say, a nation's history overlapping and coinciding and starting and ending. Because that's really what life is. Life isn't all about starting and stopping. It's more like a highway. Like, life is a highway, like the song goes. You got cars that will occasionally merge on. You got cars that will eventually turn off. But you're always going to have cars there that are going and going and going.
I think what it's two things. One on the timeline thing. People pursue closure and they pursue permanence in their analysis of history because it gives them comfort in tomorrow. Uh, and I think it's very interesting because I agree with you because history is nothing more than an infinitely complex network of interworking factors working to make things happen that gets steadily more and more complex as time advances. Right? It's always been complex and it will always be complex. It's just more so. Whenever it comes to the highway analogy, I think one of my like people pursue permanence in the people they live their lives with, right? You see it everywhere. You see it in marriage. You see it in uh, friendships. You see it in the workplace you work at. And I think that people like they want to think these are the people. This is the person. This is the place that I'll be for the rest of my life. And that's not necessarily a bad thing to strive for, But I think you still have to accept that there are going to be people that are no less the experiences you have with them are no less valuable for the brevity that they have been in your life, right? It's like that somebody doesn't need to be there forever for the experience of having been with them to have been worth it. And I say that, but even then I struggle with it, right? I don't really truly accept that in my heart, even though I think I know it to be true. But it's fascinating because you'll drive with somebody on the highway for a while and then they disappear.
Yeah, actually, during my road trip that I was just talking about, we like choose a car and just stay behind it as long as it's going at a reasonable speed, and we'd like just kind of form a bond with that car
Yeah,
just
I
because we were
definitely feel
driving
that.
behind it for so long, and then it turn off, and it'd be like, oh, we were just kind of joking around, but we actually kind of feel sad.
I entirely get that. Like you just feel these like even in the most like it's like the people you have your classes with, like their classmates or your coworkers. Like I've definitely had that feeling multiple times, and it's a bit more in depth involved than somebody driving with on the highway, but it's kind of similar in the sense. Like I have uh I have out been employed, I guess is the right word, at work than like 8 other part-time employees. So I have like been here longer than 8 of those employees. Ladybug, you don't look like a ladybug. You look terrifying whenever your wings are open. I think it's the shadows of the room, but you're fucking crazy looking, dude. Okay.
I still see your shadows in my room. Go ahead.
And it's like I didn't even like all of my coworkers that are now gone. I like some of them. I dislike some of them. But still like, well, they're gone and I'll probably never see them again. I remember in my senior I had to take a PE class my senior year because I didn't take one the previous year. And there's this foreign exchange student who I was pretty okay friends with in that class. I didn't interact with them outside of it, but I was pretty good friends. And then she walked up to me and my other friend in the class as we were walking away from our final class for the year. She walks up to us, she's like, "Have a good life." She gave both of us a hug and then walked away. I'm like, "Holy shit! I'm never gonna see this person again."
Mm.
It's like, oh no.
Yeah, yeah, and kind of like what you said earlier, with like with like reading a book when you get to the end, you feel a bit sad, and it kind of lets you know that you don't read the book to get to the end. That's not the goal.
Yeah,
You read the book
yeah,
to enjoy it, and
yeah. I
I think
remember.
you just have to look at like pretty much everything in life that way. Like, why are you doing it? Because you're not doing it so that it's done. That's just kind of like an extrinsic thing. That's just the nature of a process is that it has to end. So you don't do things simply so that it ends. You do it for a reason. And I think like going to school. We didn't go to school to graduate. At least no we didn't. We went to school to learn. And graduating is just the process of that stage of learning coming to an end. And so like a lot of us getting sad about graduation is weird because like our whole lives we say, oh, we don't like school or we don't like this part of it, or oh, I'm so excited to go off and do these things. But
We are so we like the comfort
yeah,
of having that ritual, that routine, because it's like we love the idea of closure, but we hate it when it arrives.
yeah,
Because
exactly.
in a major way, like death, like a loved one dying, is probably the most closure you're ever going to get out of a person. Period. But it also isn't. It's like the least closure thing and the most closure thing ever. And it's the same for whenever we die. Yet we dread it and want it all the same.
We dread it
Like
and want it all the same. Yeah, like honestly, like sometimes I'll step out of the shower. It's a shower thought sort of thing, and I'll be like, if I died now, would I be okay with that? Would I be cool with that?
I mean,
Or would I be kind of
it wouldn't
upset?
really matter if you were chill with it. You know, it's interesting. It's weird because part of you should live that way. You should live the way you live like you're gonna die tomorrow and that you want to live the best life you can. But you should also live as though you're gonna live today, right? It's like it's
Yeah,
two totally paradoxical things that you have to and it at all times. That's what being an adult sucks so much. Is like if you have to accept both these all these from so many different angles, these paradoxical and contradictory ideas and thoughts, and just live with it. It's like what the fuck? I
you
don't,
just gotta live with it.
dude. I wish I was stupid. Not that I'm ridiculously smart, but I'm smart enough to know how stupid I am. I wish I was more stupid.
You wish you were in that like happy medium of like smart enough to get
Yes,
by, but stupid enough to think that you're smart.
that's exactly where I wish I was.
uh,
And there's so much I don't know. Oh shit.
so much you don't know, and that's another thing that kind of frustrates me. It's like I don't even know what I don't know. That's stupid, and that's another thing. That's like experience is the best teacher. And so that's why like Grandma Lou says, like you aren't really wise until like you're at least 60, because you just gotta live. You just gotta have the experiences. You can't force experiences to happen, at least not as much as we think we do. Because like we were actually talking somewhat about this in my philosophy class, because we've moved on from our last book, which is general philosophy of mind, and now we're talking about causation in psychology. And humans kind of have this weird idea of causation called singular causation that we have not observed in any other sentient creatures, because you got animals who kind of form general causation, like this input generally causes this output. So like if my dog goes outside, she expects a treat because we generally give her a treat when she comes inside, and if we don't do that, she's like, oh, okay, and then she just forgets about it and then expects a treat the next time, because that's just how things learn and are conditioned. But with humans, we kind of retroactively attach specific events to specific outcomes. Like, oh, I feel good because I ate healthy food, or I feel relaxed because I listened to this song. When really there's probably a lot of factors at play, and it's weird how we kind of like pin some of these things onto specific factors, and then it gets more complicated when you have, say, like criminal trials. It's like, what was the motive? Well, there are 10 potential motives for this person to have like robbed the bank, but which one were they acting on when they robbed the bank, and could we ever even know that? And so the idea of singular causation is just kind of something interesting with humans. And where's it going with this? Yeah, it had to do with patience somehow, but oh yeah, life experience and whatnot. We just kind of have this feeling that's like, oh, I can cause things. I can make things happen. I can do things. I can make them come to me. We kind of give ourselves more agency than we really have when it comes to a lot of our life circumstances, which sometimes is to our benefit. It's like yeah, free will. We can do things, and we can. But what really allows us to do those things is generally just time marching forward
Circumstance.
and circumstance. Yeah, things just kind of coming, and us chasing after them as we see them coming. Us walking through the doors as they open. We can't open the doors, but when they do open, we can choose to like walk through.
But
And
it's really
so
interesting, but we
it's
can
weird.
open doors for others, you know?
Yes, we can, but we
Isn't
not for
that
ourselves.
weird? You can't open doors for yourselves usually, but you can open doors for others. Nepotism is a good thing.
So it is very fascinating to just think
I
about
agree with you.
like
I really, you're making me want to go and take philosophy classes, and I've always wanted to be a philosophy major. I just wish that like I could do something with that, you know?
yeah. I kind of like what I'm doing with my philosophy minor, because it's so distinct from like the math and computer science classes I'm taking, because in math and computer science it's very concrete, logical, processes, and how do you work with these and what can you do with
Have
these.
you talked about Aristotle yet?
Yes, actually. Oh no, I have it downstairs, but I have the Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle downstairs.
But he's like the father of logic. Can you use any of that stuff? I'm sorry to interrupt him. I'm very interested in this. Can you use any of like his logic stuff for coding? Is there any like
From
because
what
his
I've
whole
read,
thing
no, because we are mostly focusing on his talk about ethics. But if I kept reading him, because we read like the first half of the book and then like the last chapter, um, maybe, I don't know.
so it's great, okay, two things are good. I want to talk about something I think is really interesting that might apply to coding to you, but also something that's kind of existential and like talking about all this closure and stuff. Like from antiquity, I think we don't have like 90% of writings from antiquity, right? Like 90% of written texts were lost, and a lot of Aristotle's work is lost. So like we only have such a tiny percentage of it, mostly because of the Muslim world. Also, something I find really interesting is that he Aristotle was like the father of logical thought, and he started like I'm sure you've heard of premises and conclusions, right? So
Yeah.
he kind of founded this like a bunch of basic logical structures, but his basic is if premise one and premise two are true, then the conclusion must be true. And like that's the corest, like the simplest thing. So it's like P1 plus P2 if true equals C. Does that
Like,
sound
sort of.
like
Like, and
could
like that's kind of what we're focusing on in my discrete math class. Is just a lot of logical analysis. It's like right now we're talking about what equality is, and equality is reflexive, symmetric, and transitive. It's reflexive because if two sides of an equation are equal, then you could flip it around. And symmetric because one thing on one side of the equation is equal to what's on the other side of the equation, and it's transitive because if you have A equal to B, B equal to C, then C is equal to A as well. And so, if Aristotle's really like the father of logic, and once I read him more, then yeah, I would assume I would see a lot of like that sort of thing in his writing. And so it definitely does have applications to computer science then.
have you heard about uh is it the Archimedean computer?
I don't
Interesting. I'm
think
gonna look it up.
so.
It might blow your mind, or maybe you heard about it. It was made in Greece. Yes, yes. The I'm not going to try and pronounce it. The Antikythera mechanism. Uh, it was a it could be used. It was used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses decades in advance. It could be used to track 4-year cycle of athletic games, which is similar to an Olympiad, the cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. I'll send you the Wikipedia article. But it
Oh, I'll
was
have to read
used in
that.
ancient Greek ships.
That's sick. And that's just a very interesting thing though, because that's kind of what computer science is. It's just like it's logic, and instead of just keeping logic as this like abstract idea, just like have little bits and pieces, like physical things that represent the abstract ideas of like ands and ors and
It was
Nelsons and
made
equals and all
in
that.
the second century BC. The
That's
first
pretty
ever
sweet.
analog computer, second century BC, based off of mathematic principles developed by men like Aristotle.
That's sick. It's really
That is
cool.
fucking sick.
It is weird
You
though.
see, you're just making synapses connect to my brain. I'm sorry that I'm going on this tangent.
You're good, but it is just so weird because like on my Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I go to philosophy first thing, and then I go straight from there to data structures, and just going from all this like abstract, vague, thinking about things, to very concrete, uh, you know, logical math. It is so weird. Well, and you also have to ask like the goal of say computer science is actually embedded in closure. You have a problem, let's solve it. We know there's a we know there's probably a solution. Let's do it. And then you figure out how to do it. And you do it and you're done. Philosophy though, it's not about arriving at a destination. It's not about getting closure. It's just about asking questions and asking more questions and just asking questions over and over to get further from the original questions. So I think it's
I
very
think it's
interesting to have both those
really
trains of
interesting in
thought.
how like antithetical that frame of thinking is to like the so like you're studying Western philosophy really right now, and that's the core of Western thinking. Yet Western thinking nowadays is so material based and so closure based in comparison to that. You know,
Yeah, it's
and
very
it's
interesting.
like and like this, I just had a thought. I don't really know like how to phrase it per se, but it's almost like it feels to me like science, the STEM fields, they develop theories to solve like understanding of things, and they're able to do that on a smaller level. But then you get up to this higher level of understanding, and it's like these theories don't work. They start to conflict. They break down, especially when the theories are working with each other. But like these theories on a very applicable level have allowed us to do many things that have made modern society. And then it's like philosophy does not have that practical level of application, but that allows you to ascend to higher and higher levels of just abstract thinking based purely on the assumption that nothing is necessarily inherently correct. Whereas
Yeah.
though the ascension of the STEM field is going to be locked behind their practicability to solve real world problems beneath them. You know,
Yeah. But I'm really grateful to this one professor, Dr. Groves, during orientation, who, when I told him I was doing game dev as my computer science as my major, he recommended doing philosophy as a minor to supplement that, and I'm very grateful he did because I'm enjoying it, and just because the thought processes for like computer science versus philosophy are just so different, and it really kind of helps you appreciate things from more angles. It kind of helps you gain perspective faster, uh, because that's the thing. You can't force perspective to come to you, but by taking the right frame of mind and frame of reference and encountering things from as many angles as you can and being equipped to do so does help perspective come faster. It kind of accelerates the rate at which you acquire it, because perspective is based on circumstance, which you can't control, but also based on how you think about it, how you approach it, which you can control and which you can kind of learn how to do more efficiently and effectively. Which I think is what we're doing, like just doing these podcasts and reading and watching things online with philosophy and whatnot. Just the process of doing that is equipping you to gain perspective faster, which I think is very valuable. And that's the value of philosophy. And you can use that in many practical settings, like especially in computer science. Thinking about things in a more abstract way can sometimes help you find a linear solution. Uh,
I
and
100% agree.
so it's weird because philosophy doesn't point to like a direct career path other than like a teacher or like perhaps a
Other
therapist.
than to be a member of academia in philosophy.
Exactly. But as long as you have a minor that gives you what you need to like apply that somewhere, like you could be a powerhouse of perspective.
I think that it's so valuable. That's a damn shame that it's not as appreciated as it used to be in Western society. I think that has attached as people are to concrete solutions and concrete answers. Like philosophy always will have a place, but you see it in universities across the country. It's just like it's being deprioritized with the other humanities, of course. I will say I think you have a place to be at 1 o'clock.
I do. I do want to talk about one more thing really quick that
Okay.
kind of ties to. I was watching Schindler's List for the first time with my parents last night.
Oh,
Very good
really?
movie. And uh, I remember at one point you had a lot of Jews lining up, and they were they were trying to convince the Nazis that they were essential workers, so they could go off and work in Nazi camps and factories to produce things for the war effort. And the movie focused on this one person who was deemed a non-essential worker. He was like, "Why am I not essential? What? I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher of history and English. Why is that not essential?" And I think a lot of viewers nowadays would kind of gloss over that, but I honed in
I
on
like
that
it.
as like, well,
Yeah,
Spielberg did a great job of throwing that in there, assuming it was his idea, just because like, yeah, a lot of people see that stuff as not essential nowadays, um, but really is, because like I touched on, it kind of builds you up to gain perspective faster and to handle it more, because like circumstance like will bring you some amount of perspective, but like if you can't do much with it because you haven't been
I
equipped to
think
do so, it's like that's dangerous.
circumstance gives you your unique perspective, your unique experiences, and then philosophy, English, and these other disciplines teach you to draw upon other people's perspectives from their circumstances. And I think that you could live a valuable life just with your own perspective and your own circumstance, but you can live a much more enriched and fulfilled life if you are capable of learning from others. And I think because I think that's the reason they're called the humanities. They're all fundamentally at their core the study of human things, right? Things that only humans do and draw value from: writing, reading, philosophy, and all those things. Uh, and of course, it's not like lions are doing advanced computer science, but it's still like a lion would still appreciate the benefits that STEM has brought to them, whereas only a human could understand the inherent value behind something like Steven Spielberg's work, and including that line.
Yeah. So I really like this. I'm not gonna lie. When I woke up this morning, I was like, I feel like today's not gonna be that good of an episode for some reason, but I really like the discussion we had.
But yeah, I think it was really, really solid discussion. It's like the first episode we've done in a couple of weeks where we haven't had a guest. Is that right? Or was it just like last week and then?
So we alternated. So episode 5 we had one, then we didn't, then we had one with Taryn. Now we didn't. Uh, we could maybe keep that pattern going. I don't know. It just
I
depends
don't know for
on
that.
if anyone's available. But
From my perspective, I will say we'll have people available uh, going into next week, this weekend. I know going into Friday and such. All right, but I will need to end this soonish because I have to use the restroom and you need to go. So what funny bit do we want to end this one on? Do we want to
hmm,
um
you know,
talk?
this episode's been all about patience. I think we will simply wait for the funny to come, and if we have to wait till next week, so be it.
Okay, I'm ready.